Hello and welcome to Unleashed, the show that explores how to thrive as an independent professional. Unleashed is produced by Umbrex, which connects you with the world's top independent management consultants. And I'm your host, Will Bachman. I'm so excited to be here today with Carolina Miranda, who is the founder and CEO of Cultivating Capital, a firm that helps certify businesses as B corporations and helps those businesses implement sustainable business practices. And today I'm going to learn all about B Corps. So Carolina, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Will.
So Carolina, first educate me. My listeners probably know more about this than I do, but what is a B Corp?
Sure. A B Corp is a business that makes a commitment to have a positive impact on all of its stakeholders. So it takes into account how it's affecting its employees, its suppliers, its local community, and it commits to acting in their best interest. So it takes a very holistic view of what its role is within the business and social community. And in order to assess its practices and improve its practices, it actually undergoes a third-party certification process. So there's a nonprofit based in Pennsylvania called B-Lab, and they are the ones who came up with this. And in order to get certified as a B Corp, a business needs to complete a B impact assessment, which is a very comprehensive questionnaire. It looks at 5 key areas: governance, workers, community, environment, and customers. And in that, in all of those areas, it basically asks a lot of very detailed questions about a company's practices. When a company answers enough of those questions in the affirmative, it can submit their assessment for review to B-Lab, and then they're assigned a standards analyst. That analyst will then ask for documentation to verify everything that the company has said it's doing. And when that process is complete, then the company gets this third-party certification, which is B Corp certification. And that's the part that I help clients with. Now, it's important to understand that this is related to, but separate from benefit corporations. So benefit corporations are a legal status similar to a C Corp or an S Corp or an LLC that a business can decide to set up as. It's actually something that was started by B-Lab. So this nonprofit recognized that in order to really have companies not just acting in a positive way when it was convenient, but making sure that companies were actually willing to commit themselves legally to taking all stakeholders into account, that it would be beneficial to actually codify that in their, in what they do as a corporation. And so prior to the emergence of benefit corporations, there were only C Corps and S Corps, which is what most of us are familiar with. Once B-Lab started working on a state-by-state level to actually pass benefit corporation legislation, it now exists in approximately 30 states, including Delaware, which obviously is the important one. And so the benefit corporation is a legal status. The way that they're related, of course, is that it tends to attract similar types of businesses. But it's important to understand that if you choose to set up as a benefit corporation, you actually don't have to go and become a certified B Corp. There's some nuances involved, but you don't have to go and become a certified B Corp. If you do become a certified B Corp and you are a C Corp or an S Corp, then you do commit to converting to a benefit corporation within 2 years after your certification. As part of your certification process, you make that commitment. If you're an LLC, then what you need to do is update your member agreement to include specific language about the purpose of your business. So that's probably the long answer to your question, but that's the basic gist of what a B Corp is and how it's distinct from a benefit corporation.
Okay. So a B Corp is a certification then that an LLC could get, or an S Corp, or a C Corp.
Or a sole proprietor for that matter. It's a specific certification for a business.
Okay, great. Um, so I have a bunch of questions about this. Maybe first is, what's the advantage of getting the certification? Um, are there like big corporate customers out there that will be more likely to hire you, or the government maybe didn't, more likely to hire you? Like, I mean, you could probably just do these things, on your own. So why go to all the trouble of getting the certification?
Yeah, that's a good question. So one of the benefits is that because the B Corp certification process is so rigorous, it is actually becoming very well respected. Some people consider it kind of analogous to what fair trade or organic might be, but for a whole company. And the truth is that there really isn't anything else that is quite like it out there. So the certification is rigorous enough that when a company goes through it, they are really setting themselves apart in the marketplace. Just to give you an idea, there's about 3,000 B Corps worldwide. So this isn't just a certification that's available in the US, it's actually available worldwide. There's B Corps on every continent except for Antarctica. And so when a company has that B Corp certification, they are really setting themselves apart in a very significant way. A couple of B Corps that listeners might be familiar with are Patagonia and Ben & Jerry's. Danone North America has also gone through the B Corp certification process. Athleta, as a subsidiary of the Gap, is also a certified B Corp. And so it's really something that is very much for early adopters at this point. And so in the sense that the people that are willing to commit themselves to undergoing this process are the ones who are very deeply committed to it. It is something that's available to everyone. In certain industries, of course, it's going to be more relevant than others. So one place where B Corp certification is really becoming significant is with consumer goods and consumer-facing brands, such as the ones that I mentioned. So certainly with products that are available to consumers, that the B Corp logo does have, it carries a lot of weight to it. Now, as far as attracting, different types of clients, one of the things that we're seeing in the sustainability space is that more companies are putting into their RFPs that they want to know what type of environmental and social commitment a business has. And so this becomes one very clear and specific way to kind of send that signal that a business has done its due diligence and has really evaluated its social and environmental impact. And one of the things actually that we're seeing now being, especially I'd say the last few months, maybe the last couple of years, is there is growing interest from large corporations in B Corp certification. So when B Corp started, the founding B Corps were certified in 2007. It was something that very much attracted a lot of smaller businesses, medium-sized businesses. But now that it's gained traction, it's actually gained a lot of attention at the multinational level. So there was actually a group that was put together. Paul Pullman from Unilever has been very involved in looking at how to adequately assess the operations of large multinational corporations using the B impact assessment. So it's definitely something that is on the radar of larger corporations, and I expect that we're only going to see that increase in the coming years.
All right. So let's say for a listener to the show who's running a independent practice or a boutique professional services firm, have you seen any cases where uh, large companies or medium-sized companies will like preferentially seek out a professional services firm that is, has a B Corp certification?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, one of the things that is very appealing for service professionals is that there are business development opportunities within the B Corp community itself. So because B Corp certification is so rigorous, and because the companies that and businesses, again, it might be a a sole proprietor, because they are making this commitment, there is a lot of interest in working together and in kind of strengthening those relationships. So I would say, one opportunity is definitely within the B Corp community. And then the second thing, particularly for consultants who might be doing any type of social or environmental work with clients, it is something that clients, companies are thinking about, that they're looking at, and it may give them an advantage over somebody who is not as well versed or does not have that third party certification.
Okay. So one thing on my mind here is, how is a B Corp, how does it balance the needs of these multiple stakeholders? So let's say you have a company, I mean, like maybe like one that you mentioned, Patagonia, right? So Patagonia has employees, and for the impact assessment in terms of the interest in employees, they could say, well, they said before they got the B Corp, they were making a certain amount of profit. Say, well, okay, employees, they could just pay all the employees more, right? And then if you're also supposed to take care of your stakeholder, your suppliers, you could say, well, you could just raise the prices that you pay to all your suppliers. And if you're supposed to take care of the environment, you say, well, they could take all their profit and devote it to environmental causes. And I know Patagonia actually does some good stuff around that. So how do you sort of, with a traditional for-profit business, it's pretty clear what you're trying to optimize. You're trying to maximize profit, but keeping in account all these other things for the long-term good of the business. You want to take care of your employees, or take care of your customers, take care of your suppliers. But when you have a B Corp, how do companies, are they expected to balance these competing interests?
Right. So one of the things that's important to just keep in mind as we talk about this is B Corps are all for-profit businesses. So there is, sometimes I do get asked, like, if a nonprofit can be a B Corp or how that works. And every single business that's a certified B Corp, they're running a profitable business, because at the end of the day, if you're not making a profit, you don't have a business. And so all of this positive impact that you're trying to have out in the world isn't going to happen. So definitely B Corps have to keep profitability top of mind. The way that it gets balanced, though, is that, again, they take a broader view of how you're generating value. And so where, say, a non-B Corp or a traditional company might say, well, why are we going to pay employees to volunteer, for example? We could, if we're paying them, we want them to be working. Otherwise, that's not necessarily the best way for us to, we could use those funds in another way, for example. Whereas a B Corp would say, well, by paying an employee to volunteer, we're doing two things. One, we're actually helping our local community, and this, generally speaking, the stronger and more resilient that your local communities are, the better that's going to be for your business. And then second of all, we are generating goodwill among our employees, which actually can help with recruitment and retention. And those are both things that we see with B Corps. Almost to a person, every time I talk to a B Corp, they say that one of the biggest benefits is that it helps with recruitment and retention, especially among millennials. So a lot of people right now, they are, generally speaking, looking for a company to work with that they're going to feel good about. And B Corps actually help people to fulfill that need of working for a purpose that is larger than themselves. And I've seen that even for myself. My contractors, my interns, I don't seek them out. They actually come to me because I'm a B Corp and they're attracted to the work that I'm doing. So you see it at all levels, but that's really the way that a B Corp will balance things out, is they'll start looking at what are the things that align with who we are as a company and how do we invest in those things. Another example, and again, Patagonia was instrumental in this, is there's a program called 1% for the Planet, where companies will agree to donate 1% of revenues to environmental organizations. A non-B Corp might look at that and say, well, why are we going to donate to an environmental organization when, we can go ahead and take those profits and, give them back to employees as a bonus, or, we can reinvest that. But a B Corp might say, you know what, we recognize that we are interdependent with the environment that we're in. All of the resources that we use to make our products, to transport our products, all of that is dependent upon natural resources. And so it's really in our best interest to protect those resources. And so therefore, joining a program like 1% for the Planet actually makes sense. And again, it helps employees to feel good about the company that they're working with. It sends a message to customers that this company actually stands for something. Everybody knows that every single company that exists has to make a profit. So when that's the baseline, one of the ways that you can actually differentiate is say, you know what, we make a profit and we also take care of our environment, and we take care of our local community, and we take care of our employees, and we're looking for the long term. And when you're able to do that effectively, then you actually get more customer loyalty than you might get otherwise. And I think Patagonia is a great example of that.
Yeah. So those are some helpful examples. I guess maybe I'm not clear on is there just sort of a big menu of sort of optional things, or let's take maybe just the environmental commitment in particular as an example. To get certified as a B Corp, is there a set of mandatory things, like you must devote 1% of your revenues to the planet, or maybe is that just like one of the several different optional things you can do? Walk me through some of like the bare minimum requirements that you have to meet.
Yeah, that's a good question. So the way that the impact assessment is set up, there are actually no baseline requirements. So other than the legal requirement, which we already discussed, there's no one single thing that it's like you absolutely have to do this in order to get certified as a B Corp. Rather, what it does is it asks a lot of questions, like about 200 as you're going through the assessment. And for each question, depending upon how you answer it, you will get points. And so you're basically being rewarded for your positive practices rather than having to meet a specific baseline. So the examples that I gave are all things that a B Corp can do, but they actually don't have to do any of those. And so when I was talking about their commitment, it's not that a company is saying, well, I commit to this one specific practice, such as giving a percentage of our revenues to charity. What the company is doing is actually committing to a wide range of practices that cover governance, workers, community, environment, and customers. And because you have to reach 80 points, then you actually have to do quite a few different things. You can't say, well, we have a recycling program in place, and so, now we can qualify as a B Corp. You will get a little bit of credit for having a recycling program in place, but you're going to have to do a lot more. So the way that it's set up, because there actually is no specific practice that you absolutely have to do, it becomes a very flexible and robust framework that any business can use. So that's why you could be a sole proprietor and get certified, or you could be known and get certified, because every company is going to approach it a little differently. Maybe some companies score really highly on the worker piece because they do some really great things with their employees, but maybe they don't score as well on the environment because maybe they just haven't really delved into that too deeply.
Okay, that's super helpful. And could you maybe, let's just go through those 5 categories, and you already gave like 2 examples, but maybe we could go through those 5 categories and you could give sort of 2 or 3 examples of things that you get points for in each one of them. Like the government, I wasn't sure if it was sort of government or more like corporate governance. And so maybe we could just go through each one. We could start with government. What are some examples of things, some things that you could get points for on that?
Sure. So that one is actually governance, as in corporate governance. And so a couple of things that come up on there is, has the company made the legal commitment to take all stakeholders into account? So I mentioned that if you're a corporation, you commit to meeting that requirement within 2 years after certification, but you get credit on the impact assessment if you actually formalize that commitment before completing the certification. So basically, if you don't wait 2 years and you kind of do that early on, that's one question that is on the governance section. A couple of other things might be having a code of ethics, having a whistleblowing policy, and not just, I should say, with the code of ethics, not just having it, but what are you doing actually to train your workers on that? So is it included in your onboarding materials? Is it included, are you doing regular annual trainings on it? Another question that comes up on there is how the company is reporting on its impact. So is the company generating some type of impact report? Is that impact report publicly available? Does that impact report adhere to a third-party standard? So those are some of the things that come up in the governance section. The next section on the impact assessment is around workers. And so there are definitely specific questions about benefits that are offered. So for example, at what point, what's the percentage at which the company is matching the 401k? What kinds of benefits, health benefits are being offered? Are health benefits available to part-time employees? In addition to the benefits, the impact assessment will also ask questions around professional development and career training opportunities that are available. It will also look at equity, diversity, and inclusion. So is the company, what's the diversity in the company? And not just in terms of, say, race and gender, but even age diversity. So how diverse is the company? Because generally speaking, there's a lot of data out there that is showing that the more diverse that a company is, the more resilient that it is, the more ideas that are coming in, so you're kind of avoiding groupthink. So there's a lot of reasons that kind of underlie what some of these questions are for. Another thing that might come up on the workers section is if the company has any type of employee ownership opportunities. So again, that becomes a way of making capital more accessible to people, because now it's not just the owners that are basically reaping the bulk of the profits, but it is all workers who might have an opportunity to take part in that. So that's the workers section. In the community section, the questions will look at what is the company doing in terms of charitable giving practices, in terms of community service. We already kind of talked a little bit about that, but really in the community section, it takes a deep dive into supply chain. So what is the company doing to evaluate its supply chain? And there it might range from, are suppliers asked to complete a code of conduct? Are suppliers asked to report on their own social and environmental performance in any way? Is a company working with local suppliers, which actually can have a significant impact on the local community? Is a company working with independent suppliers? So it really will help the company to assess what is happening in its supply chain, recognizing that that's one of the most challenging parts for, for a lot of companies to assess. On the environment side, some of the questions that might come up are going to be around the facility. What are some of the more specific practices that are being followed in the facility, such as, anything from LED lights to low flow water fixtures. But it really looks beyond that. It looks at renewable energy usage. It looks at, has the company calculated its carbon footprint? And if the company has calculated its carbon footprint, is it investing in offsets as a way of reducing its overall carbon footprint? If it's a product-based company, because you have both product and service businesses that can obviously get certified, if it's a product-based company, then this is where the impact assessment will delve a bit more into the manufacturing process and distribution channels. So all of that gets looked at in the environment. And then in the customers section, it's really looking at two things. One is, what is a company doing to be a good, a good steward of its customers? And so that can include things like being transparent with how information is being collected and how it's being used. And the second thing that it looks at is the company supporting, for example, purpose-driven or underserved customers in any way? So this is where, if say a company has developed, say, a microfinance program that is benefiting, people on the bottom of the pyramid, they're definitely helping to serve an underserved community. And so therefore, they're going to be able to get credit on the impact assessment for that. So that's a very high level, quick overview, but I hope that gives you an idea of what gets assessed in different parts of the impact assessment.
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic overview. Tell me a little bit. It sounds like a lot of paperwork and a lot of stuff to do. Tell me a little bit about the cost and the process to apply for this certification. It sounds like it's a lot of work. I mean, even just one of those things of documenting all of your carbon footprint and so forth, just one of those things could be a lot of work. What's it cost to apply? Typically, it's to prepare your submission, and then I imagine there must be a fee to this, to the certifying body as well.
Sure. There are fees that are due to BLab annually, and that is publicly available on their website, which is bcorporation.net. And there's a link there for certification. And on that page, you will find a lot of information about the certification process. And that's where the annual fees are listed. It tends to be, on average, roughly speaking, maybe less than 1% of revenues, just to give you an idea of what it might cost, but it's broken out based upon a company's revenues. And again, that's all publicly available. In order to get certified, you can start the process either by going to their website, clicking on certification, and then I think they have a get started link, or there's another website called bimpactassessment.net. They both will lead into the same place in the sense that you start the impact assessment, and that is a tool that is freely available. Anybody can go into the impact assessment and start working on it. So there's actually no cost to submit your impact assessment to BLab. Where the cost comes in is after you've submitted your assessment, after you have completed the review process and you have qualified for certification, then at that point you are expected to pay your fees for the first year, and then you get invoiced, annually thereafter. Now, that said, there are definitely some expenses that you might incur as you're going through the process, as you mentioned, you know, carbon footprint calculations being one of them. And then certainly if you're working with a consultant such as myself, then, you know, the fees are of course separate.
Yeah. So what should, and order of magnitude in your experience, what % of people that submit an application actually get approved?
So what I was actually told by someone at B Lab is that it's less than 50%
Whoa.
of companies that submit an impact assessment actually proceed to certification. And that could be due to a number of different factors. It might be that they actually filled out the impact assessment wrong. There's different tracks on the impact assessment depending upon, you know, whether you're a wholesale, retail, whether you actually have control of your manufacturing facilities, right? It can get, there's a few different categories. And sometimes when people are filling it out on their own, they actually end up inadvertently filling out the wrong one. And then they realize at the end that they actually should have been filling out a different one. They might find that they have filled it out on the basis of things that they hope to do or are planning to do. But the way that the impact assessment is set up, it's not actually looking at, it's not aspirational in that sense. It's really looking at what's your track record, what can you actually demonstrate that you've done. Another reason why people might not be able to get certified is maybe they didn't have their documentation in place. And so they answered certain questions. And then when they get to the review process, maybe they actually don't have the documentation to actually back up everything that they've answered. So these are all reasons why a company might not get certified when they submit their impact assessment and go through the review process. That said, it's not as though, you know, they get kicked out automatically and don't qualify because they filled it out incorrectly. The standards analyst will generally be able to provide recommendations for improvement, and the impact assessment has a built-in feature that helps a company to identify areas where they can improve. So based upon how other companies have answered this, they will say, just an automatically generated report might say, you know, here's some measures that you might want to consider. One other thing that I forgot to mention, but that is important, is in addition to completing the impact assessment, there's also a disclosure questionnaire. And that questionnaire will ask about any corporate practices that may not have come up on the impact assessment itself. So that might include bankruptcies, on-site fatalities, lawsuits, you know, specific industries such as, you know, gambling or working in conflict zones, any kind of things like that will come up during the impact, or excuse me, during the disclosure questionnaire, because again, B Lab wants to do its due diligence before issuing the final certification. Like I said, it's pretty comprehensive.
So, yeah. So if you fail the certification, do they give you feedback and say, well, you know, we suggest you tweak these things, and then you can, like, you don't have to resubmit the whole thing again. But if you come back, you know, you didn't give us this form and you didn't, you know, this thing, what you said you're going to do it, but once you've actually done it, then come back to us and just retweak it, like so, or is it just like, oh, you failed, tough luck, try next year?
Yeah, no, it's definitely not a matter of you failed and so you can't do it. When you are working with a standards analyst, when you get to that, well, let me actually take a step back. When you're submitting your impact assessment, you know, if they find that there's significant changes that need to be made, they'll let you know that. When you are assigned a standards analyst and you're actually providing your documentation, if it turns out that you are not at a verified score of 80, then, like I said, they will make suggestions for what you need to do to increase your score, and they'll give you some time. They'll give you like a 30-day period to, you know, go ahead and make those fixes. If it turns out that you don't qualify at that point, you can always continue making improvements and then resubmit your assessment when you're ready, when you've got things in place.
Okay. And we talked about cost a little bit. When you talk to a business owner who's preparing to go through this process, what sort of expectations do you set in terms of just the amount of time it's going to take? Is this something that you pull together in a weekend? Does it take 2 months of dedicated work? Like, order of magnitude, how much sort of time should a person expect to put into filling out all these forms and getting all the documentation together and so forth?
Yeah, I would say, I usually tell people like 4 to 6 months is how long it's going to take us to get everything ready. It might, and that's because, people are still running a business. And so, even though this is very related to what they're doing, it still means that they need to not just get the paperwork in place, but they actually need to go through and make improvements. Like, for example, if they don't yet have a charitable giving policy or program in place and they need to put that in place, it might take some time to actually get that policy there, get it through HR, make sure that you're getting the word out to employees, make sure that you've thought about what that's going to look like. So for a smaller business, I would say 4 to 6 months to get it ready to submit to B-Lab. For a larger business, you could be looking at 6 to 12 months. For a multinational, you could be looking at more than that. And the other thing to keep in mind is there is really a lot of growing interest in B Corps. It's certainly something I've seen a few years ago. People didn't really know what B Corps were all about. Now, I think that the word is getting out about what B Corps are, and it's generating a lot of interest in the certification. What this means is that B-Lab, which is, like I said, the certifying body, they actually have a backlog that they're working through. So you submit your assessment, and then you actually might just be waiting for a couple of months for them to actually, get to you so that they can actually start the that final review process.
Okay. And then if you do get the certification, you mentioned earlier that you're also committing to shift over to be a benefit corporation as a legal entity change. That's if you're an S Corp or a C Corp. You said if you're an LLC, you can stay the same, but you update your operating agreement. What's involved in that change from an S Corp or a C Corp to this benefit corp? Does it have tax implications, or what's sort of typically involved in that shift?
Yeah, usually what it involves is amending your articles of incorporation. So there's specific language that needs to be added, and that's also available on the B Corp website, bcorporation.net. Go to certification, and then there's a link there for the legal requirement where you can actually see what the details are. But in general, it's updating your operating agreement. So usually an attorney, will handle that. It doesn't take an attorney that long to get it done from what I've seen. As far as tax implications go, it's not, a benefit corporation is not recognized as a different tax status for federal tax purposes. So what that means is when a company converts to become a benefit corporation, they can still file their taxes as either a C Corp or an S Corp. If you're an LLC, you're still going to file as an LLC. So it has no direct tax implications in general. That said, I'm not an accountant, but I do know a B Corp accountant that I could refer people to if they have questions, or most of my clients will talk to their accountant and get the details. But generally speaking, there shouldn't be any significant tax implications.
Oh, okay. Does it change anything on the governance side? So if you were privately owned now, do you have to have some representative of the community or of your employees or something on your board or anything like that?
So the benefit corporation, status has been passed, like I said, in about 30 states, and each one handles it a little differently. So you would need to look to see specifically what the requirement is for your state, and that's where it's going to be best to work with an attorney in that state who's familiar with benefit corporation. But generally speaking, there are a couple of three requirements. One is you do need to amend your articles of incorporation to basically reflect a commitment to all stakeholders. The second thing is generally you need to specify how you're going to evaluate your impact, and often that will include using a third-party standard. So the B impact assessment is one third-party standard that can be used, but it's not the only one. And so in different states, there might be different ones that can be accepted. And then the third thing is you need to report annually on how you are progressing towards your stated purpose and your impact. And so generally that involves producing some type of annual report.
All right. Wow. Amazing. So this has been incredibly informative, Carolina. Carolina, thank you so much for walking me through this. Wow. You really know your stuff. How can people find you if they want to follow up and ask you more questions about this, maybe get your help on this topic? Where should people go?
The best place to go is to my website, which is cultivatingcapital.com. So that's cultivatingcapital.com. And then on there's a contact form. They can fill that out, and I'd be happy to follow up with them. They're also welcome to just email me directly. It's just Carolina@cultivatingcapital.com.
Fantastic. Well, Carolina, thank you so much for joining today. I learned a ton, and thanks for explaining to me all about B Corps.
Great. Thank you, Will.